I'm Isaiah, your host from Token Travelers, and today we have Romina Hendlin, who's a Venezuelan native who's been in America for a length of time, a photographer and an anthropologist, and I'm really excited to dig into your background and share also about your project Beach Vendors. So I'm casting the bait now for people to listen. We're going to get to Beach Vendors soon, but I'm really interested in how your background and your personal background, your professional background have shaped what you do today in regards to your craft and passion for travels as well. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, for sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast, Isaiah. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm
Thank
excited
you.
for
Yeah.
to talk with you. And yeah, thank you for your interest. Um, yes, so as you said, I'm a Venezuelan native. I was born in Venezuela, in Caracas, the main city. And yeah, I lived there until I was 25. And then I had this crazy fate kind of thing that I won the green card through lottery online
Wow.
like that. Yes, it was like, the gods telling me, come to America. And then so I migrated and I studied photography. I had previously started in Venezuela for years of studying every kind of possible course that I could to get to understand more the profession.
What was your
Um,
interest back then in photography? Like, was it something you wanted to do as a career or just as a passion?
Well, I studied mass media communications at the university, and I took a course there, and I really fell in love with the technical part of it and the interesting way to see the world in a different, with a different lens, with a different perspective. And what happened was that I was so interested in it that I decided to start taking courses outside of the university, and I fell in love with the craft. And the school of photography used to travel around the country and do this 3-day trips, 5-day trips. I was very lucky that I was able to do those trips, and I started to get to know my country in a way that I wouldn't have
Yeah.
if I didn't have the photography excuse. And this is like 2006, 2007. We are still with film cameras. Digital has not yet come in. We don't have social media or cell phones that have great cameras. So this is all, I would take two cameras and choose black and white film for one and color for the other, to make sure that I would have those two types of photographs. And the more I travel and the more courses I took, the more I fell in love. And I started a little bit there in Venezuela to work. Like I started to get my first clients, until I had this fate come to me and say, maybe your path is the US, by winning this green card. And then I moved to the US, here to New York, where I live now, and did a more professional program at
Mm-hmm.
the International Center of Photography. It was a documentary and photojournalism program, which gave me a ton of other tools, but also it gave me a ton of connections. Because later in life you start, or early in life, depends, you start to
Equally
get
important, right? Because we see
connections.
it all the time. Like the connections are equally, I don't want to say equally important, but it's almost like that skill set. There's so much talent in the world, and so many people are so skilled, and we see it. Just, I think, in my circles in Twitter, I see people producing amazing work with amazing stories behind it, and like I've seen that open doors for people, but I've also seen people not be seen yet, and hopefully they will in the future. But making connections, right when you got to the US was probably really valuable. And I wonder, have you been able to, so when you were traveling Venezuela for
Yeah,
photography,
yeah.
there's, I think, I don't want to sound ignorant, but I think that the tribe I have, for Bornea and for Venezuela, I have contacts, and I think Venezuela, I'm more interested in doing this. But there's an indigenous tribe called the Makushi, I believe, and the guy's name is Roving. and he takes people on these fishing trips, and they use like the cassava root to like make an alcohol and like the whole experience. So
Yeah.
like Venezuela's always been on my mind, right? But coming, I believe you said Caracas, right?
Yeah.
From Caracas, like, was it, you talked about getting to know your country in a new light. What
Mhm.
was like the most eye-opening experience then? That, like, was it the wilderness, was it the people, was it the cities that you visited? Was it like churches that you, or like architecture? You got to learn a lot and become it's amazing. Like, even here, the
Yeah.
United States is so big. I would just say in California, like learning about the history of California and all the different impacts that all these different people have had. It's like super interesting. I can imagine how, like, having to document all these things and going to new places, you got to learn about a lot of those things. What was like one thing that really stuck out in Venezuela?
Yeah, I mean, there's a memory that I cannot take out of my head, which was like really a sort of like before and after, I think, type of moment. Um, we did with the School of Photography. It's called Roberto Mata Taller de Fotografía. It's a school by the name of the creator of it, and he he took us to this trip that was 2 weeks around Venezuela. It was La Vuelta a Venezuela. So we would go all around Venezuela, right, or as much as we could. And in one of those cities that we visited, it was like a very remote place that we would have to like go all the way to a town and then take a curiara, which is like a short. It's a boat, but it's like it almost looks like a kayak, but
Right.
it fits more people. So it's not a boat, but it's also not a kayak.
I think it'd
It's
be more like, it sounds more like a canoe, right?
like
Like
a canoe,
it
exactly.
has higher walls, I think, and benches maybe like
Uh huh.
laid across.
Exactly.
And what was it
Exactly.
called?
Curiara.
Coriala.
Curiara.
Okay.
Una curiara. Curiara. It's just there's two R's. It's more difficult.
Coriara. Yeah.
Exactly. So we went in those curiaras to this town, and one thing that the school of photography had was that every time we would go and visit a community, we would bring, school supplies, or if necessary, food, like not perishable food or clothing. Like we would bring stuff that usually these communities are in lack of. And we arrived to this place, and there was a hill. Like we would arrive to the river, and then there was a little bit of a hill to like get into the area. And it was a very arid, is that the word? Like not dry, a very
Mm-hmm.
dry area,
Arid. Yeah. Yeah.
arid. And I saw a ton of people. Obviously, they were barefoot mostly, which I guess it's fine. It's just it's a place that doesn't have a cement. It's
Mm-hmm.
just you know sand, or like tierra. I'm gonna say a lot of words in Spanish
That's
when I don't
fine.
get them
Yeah.
in English, and then I'll come back to the English word. And what happened was the people seemed happy, but usually kids are happy in general. Kids don't understand circumstances. But I saw all the kids had cavities that I
Mm-hmm.
could clearly see in their teeth, right? And one thing after another that I saw, when you get inputs of different things, like you get an input here and then an input there, and it built up to a point where I really saw the poverty in a way that I hadn't seen. And Venezuela it's a poor country, even though it's rich in its resources,
Resources. Yeah.
but it's terribly managed. And so, it doesn't solve the poverty issue, even though it's rich in resources. And it just struck me so much that I couldn't bring my camera up. I
Mm.
thought, what am I doing? Like, why am I going to take this
That's really
picture?
interesting because I appreciate that choice, and that's not to disregard people that decide to capture those moments. But would you say, like, for you personally, so again, we're not talking about other people that had decided to document things like that, because everybody has different reasons for doing anything. But would you say that it was because, like, you didn't want to, like, take advantage of, like, someone else's circumstance? Is that how you felt, that you couldn't, like, bring the camera up? Or was it just more like you were appalled and didn't want to, um, like, honor that with the documentation? There's just different reasons. Do you kind of
Yeah.
understand why you decided not to?
Well, I think that when you start photography, everything is interesting. You want to document everything, you want to photograph everything, you want to try out different styles. And when you travel, you want to definitely document everything you travel. And then if you go abroad to, like, from where you are, you go abroad, that's everything exotic for you the first time, right? This wasn't exotic for me. This was a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Whereas someone else that would come from afar and would go into the curiara or the boat, and they would be like, wow. For me, it was like, this is my country. I understand, this mode of transportation, even though I don't use it often. Um, so for me, it was more like, what is the purpose of doing this? What am I going to do with these images? Why am I doing this? Like, why am I taking this? And what would I do with it? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
were in the context of a school, like always traveling with the school of photography. So it was always a matter of also learning. So you take to learn. And at that moment, I wasn't monetizing on that. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I was not going to, like, take the photos and sell them. I wasn't also working for an NGO, because that would be then another, questioning, right? Like, because NGOs are tricky. The kind of photos you have to bring in order to get money is tricky. But it was more like, I'm really shocked, and I feel a lot of pain right now.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive. And so I felt so much the situation that I had to stop making those photos. And I think the idea of at least stopping, pausing, and not making the photo is about reflecting on it.
Yeah.
Like, let me reflect on this moment, and let me make accurate decisions further along the line. If I'm going to document this, what am I going to do with this? Because you could definitely use this content to, like, show the people that are not going to get to that remote place, because I was lucky to be there, because it was all organized. But most people will never go to that town. Santa Ana, it's called. No, most of the people I know won't ever go to that town and see the circumstances I saw. So, you know I think it's important to reflect as photographers, as documentary photographers, or, even like landscape photographers, or travelers that run into situations that might be, vulnerable. That where
Right.
there's vulnerable people, or people in vulnerable situations, that they actually reflect on what they're doing and why are they
Yeah,
there.
the why, that introspective, like, really understanding. Yes, it makes for good imagery, right? But I think in that case, like, I would just feel a lot of pressure to somehow, like, alleviate the situation for the subjects, right? So the subjects being the people that I'd be taking a photo of. And to that point, talking about, like, the cavities, maybe lack of dental care, also education, things of that nature. When I was talking about, well, there's a book called When Helping Hurts, and it
Mm.
essentially talks about how, there's, like, a lot of charities or ministries that may give to, um, like, poor areas and give to people. And I'm not saying we shouldn't help people. We need to find ways to help people, but helping is complicated. So we need to, like, do it with finesse and intention, things like that. And so, like, if I'm just giving away shirts, that's a good thing. Like, I'm giving away shirts, right? And especially here, it's really no brainer. But I'm talking about places like that. Like, you can actually be, like, kind of hurting the local economy. And then, like, people that were making, like, textiles, like shirts and the clothing there and stuff, not only is some tradition being wasted because now everybody's wearing a Nike shirt or a Gap shirt or whatever, or Chuck E. Cheese shirt, whatever it is, like because it's important to clothe people and make sure that they're taken care of. But I guess like it's just complicated, and so it really takes like people that really dive in, investigate, understand, and actually live there. I think to like understand what kind of help is beneficial, and then people like me can like then sort of form into that and not do what I think is helping, but like listen to what other people are saying would help them and
Absolutely.
really understand the needs. So that's not quite what I wanted to dive into, but that was like a really impactful experience. And that tribe that I was talking about going with, what I like
Yeah.
more about that one than the contact that like I've come across through the internet in Borneo is that this guy like allows for you to just kind of like live with them. And so when they go upstream and they're like harvesting fish, right? Like
Mm.
I get to go and help, but it's not like a bunch of people like catering to me. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
along for the ride. And then and there is a like really cool it just seems like that situation more so than the Borneo one. That's why I'm more interested in the Venezuela one, is that um, this specific group of people in this guide, like I think, are ethical and really responsible. So there's a lot to
And
think
that's
about
key.
just in traveling, right? Like,
Yes.
and how you'll contribute to those local economies.
To be conscious, right? To be conscious about where you're going and who you want to interact with, or like what kind of situation you're going to also run into. Maybe I wasn't that, I mean, I knew, but living it is different. Experiencing it firsthand is different, right?
Absolutely. There's like local stories that I might have like that. I don't think like on that intimate of a level, because I think like also you were talking about like vulnerable situations, also vulnerable to like reflect on it. And so I think sometimes like even myself, like I'll build up walls to like try not to think about it because it's kind of desperate and I don't know what to do. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, so you did the photography, the traveling in Venezuela. You won a green card in lottery, which I never heard of, and it's interesting that like that can change. That's what can change somebody's life, is just like a raffle. And well, I'm glad it happened for you. But then, did you have to come alone at 25?
Yes.
And
So,
so how did you get like guided to like where you were gonna end up, who you'd meet? Was it just completely like figuring it out?
well, it was a bit like, I there were some people I knew here. I mean, I have family members that happen to live here, like more
Mm-hmm.
distant. So I was received by one of those family members, luckily. But I had, I guess, like, I don't know if you believe in this, but there's the thing called the law of attraction, right? And I had been looking for a long time where to move to study more photography. And I had looked into Buenos Aires, which is where some of my family live there. I had looked into Spain because my sister lives there. I always look where family is. And then I looked in New York because New York was, where the best photography programs were, or at least that's what I thought. Which is it is, but there's more in the world. But just
Right. There's other places that people could arguably say. I think. Would are you talking about like France specifically?
No, not in general. Not specifically, no. Like, but I mean, like, I didn't look anymore in Europe where I could have, or Asia, I guess. But that's too far and too foreign for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, New York had like this program that I was like, oh my God, this is perfect for me right now. But it took like a year or 2 years after I graduated from the university for like this to like pop,
Yeah.
and the green card was like the excuse, like, okay, I just want a green card, I need to leave Venezuela within the next 6 months and enter the country. Those are that's what you have to do. Like, if you win and then you go to the appointment and they say you're good to go, in 6 months you have to be there. So I applied to the program that I wanted in ICP, the documentary and photojournalism program. Today it's called the doc practice, but before it was called that way. And I got in because, again, I think that, destiny then plays along with you, I guess, sometimes when you really need or want something, and I don't know, the stars align. I don't know how to call it. I mean, I'm not a, yeah, I
I'm
just feel
not
that,
opposed
yeah,
to talking about it. It's just like there's miraculous things that happen, and like I definitely have my beliefs on them, but I would also say that like you do see evidence that, somebody or something is kind of like honoring like what you're striving for. And
hmm,
so like that's pretty interesting, but then the miraculous part is just that like the one thing that wasn't in your control was getting the green card, like that
yeah,
you applied, but
yeah,
beyond that it's just that's beyond your control. So then you came
exactly.
to New York, and then you went to another photography school, and then how do you feel about like your journey since then in regards to photography? Has it been
Well,
what you
since the,
wanted it to
the
be?
study, since studying here,
Yeah.
well, it was. I mean, it's been a very interesting process because we are the age we are, right? And so we get to live and understand life as we are going through it. And I arrived at 25, having lived with my parents until then. And so coming to study photography and then become a photographer in New York came along with like growing up, with like being independent from my parents, with like getting to know another culture and being an immigrant and missing family and missing your place and your people. So it's been a very interesting journey of a lot of ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say that now that we have social media, I mean, I don't know how it would be for people that are migrating right now, specifically in this sense, but migrating back then was really lonely. You didn't get that much communication. I used to send like these email chains to all my friends explaining everything that was happening, like once a month or something. Right now, you're so connected to everybody that it's so different to migrate. Like, people are migrating the day they're migrating, the next day, and the following day, and you can know about them every single day. Back then,
Yeah,
it wasn't
and
like that.
cell phones, like I think because the friends
Yeah,
I'm still most connected to that live far away isn't necessarily like due to social media, but like I'm still just calling people, maybe
yeah,
that's old school, but like that alone, everybody has a cell phone. Literally, like anyone that wants one can have one. Even like luckily, like even if you're homeless, like there's programs to have a cell phone, so people can stay connected, and maybe it is easier, and not in regards to like logistics and government, but like at least like maintaining those connections. My friend
mhm.
went, now they're in Massachusetts or New York, and Brooklyn, so I can see how that be, and they'd know more of what to expect. I feel like when you came out here you didn't totally know what to expect, right?
I have no idea what to expect. I also was never the kind of person that always dreamt of living here.
Mm-hmm.
I come from Venezuela, but my parents are Argentinian, and
Mm.
my grandparents came from Poland, and others are Argentinians, but their family came from Russia. So we are like a very, yeah, we're immigrants. Every generation is an
Right.
immigrant.
Yeah, you
It's very
just kept on tradition.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I've known the world because of this. I've traveled. Also, I have family in other countries, but I never expected to be far away from family and alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I moved here, it was all incredible and special. And I really think that because this is such a diverse city and I get to experience culture every single day of my life, I am in love with this place because I go out and I have people that are from like very different cultures and places and religions, and I get to experience a little bit of that. Whereas, back in Venezuela, everyone was more or less the
I
same.
guess like living in New York is like traveling every day.
It
based on
is.
what you're describing, so you brought up that your parents are Argentinian. And then
Yeah.
I told listeners we would talk about beach vendors, which is your project on OpenSea right now. And
Hmm.
I want to get into that. And then maybe afterwards we can talk like a little bit about, what you've learned with like anthropological studies that you might want to share, if that's
Yeah,
okay. So
of
I
course.
wanted to pull up, I'm going to share screen as well, but I'm going to pull up beach vendors
Yes.
and people will be able to see it on YouTube. So we'll also try to describe them for the listeners a little bit, and overall,
Yeah.
you'll just be able to talk about the collection.
Excellent. So, I finished studying the visual. I am like keep thinking about the degrees. Um, exactly. There we go. So I finished studying documentary and photojournalism, and I continued to photograph. Right, I became a photographer in New York, doing a lot of portrait work, a lot of documentary work, work with different type of clients, doing a lot of event work as well. I went into the route, of like weddings and
Yeah, we
family
talked
night,
about that. Yeah.
everything. I did everything because I had to survive, and because you realize that there's a lot to learn still. Like you think you know photography and then you don't know anything. You need to continue.
And I feel like it evolves fast, right?
It
Like
has evolved. Yeah. I
art
mean,
has evolved fast. Photography, I'm actually going to be asking, but would you say photography's been around since like the mid 1800s? Is that accurate?
yes, yes.
Then
I think I can't recall the actual date of the first photograph. Nips for Nips was the first. I am not pronouncing it well at all. That's the first photograph that was taken exactly. Um, it's a window and it's an 8 hour exposure photograph. Like
oh,
there
8 hour exposure.
the one, if you go
Goodness.
up and you open that one, if you
This
open the
one?
black and white photograph, no, go up. That, that's a photograph taken, through a window, and it's about an 8 hour exposure photograph
Wow.
because you had sensitive material, the film, and then for light to be able to be captured in that material, it needed time at that point. Like that type of material wasn't like the way it is today. And so, yeah, that took 8 hours or something
It
to be made.
almost looks like, for listeners, it looks like a charcoal. Would
Hmm.
you call that a drawing? Charcoal?
Yeah, it could definitely be. It's through a window, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see like the rooftop of other buildings,
Yeah.
right? Like the chimney style, and then a little bit of like an inclined rooftop. Um, but yeah, I
It's
mean,
actually a really cool photograph. It's
it,
it's almost abstract, and it looks like mid 1800s. So I just wanted to make sure I was accurate for listeners.
yeah,
So
yes,
photography, you can see from like that photo now to like hyper realistic, ultra HD underwater. It's just like, so that's a relatively short amount of time, because we talk about how like technology evolves so fast, like by some in some verticals of technology, like
yeah,
technology, essentially, if you go to school to learn about like engineering and about like something really specific, that can like completely evolve and be outdated by the time you're finished like learning about it. So
hmm,
due to like new technological advances, our capacity for developing new technology is like exponential, and
yeah,
it just evolves crazy fast. And then with on top of the technology, which I dove into, you talked about how like you went to school for a really extended period of time for photography, and you've had like a lot of experience, and you brought up, and I still don't know anything, and you probably weren't talking as much about the technology as you were like the art of photography, certain theories, like um, just like you know I'd like to be a photographer one day. I find it really intimidating, but
Why?
Just
Why?
all
Why
these.
is it
Why do I find
intimidating?
it intimidating? Because I'm already surrounded by like uber talented people, like just
Mm.
like people doing like stunning work, and that have done it for such a long time that like there's just so much I don't know. I'll do it, and I'm not usually scared to like try things, but I do find photography to be a little bit intimidating because I don't really flex like my artistic muscles as much as I should. Although I would say like I'm creative, I'm handy. I like do little things,
I
but
think it's all about practice. I tell my students all the time because I teach photography that, the more you photograph, the more you will get better at it. And it's not only obviously photographing, but also thinking about photography and thinking
yeah,
about what you're doing and what you want to put out there in the world. And with the amount of photographs that are out there, like I think it's a responsibility for everyone, like if you are in that mind space of like responsibility, to like even consider what is it that you want to actually give to the world. What is it? And then
that's
I think that
kind of the intimidating part too. It's like almost all the photos I've taken, which people now, like, I've taken thousands of photographs, right?
yes.
And since I was little, I was obsessed with photography. It's just not like the decisions I made didn't like weren't conducive to me ending up a photographer by this time.
Yeah.
But like I think like what's interesting is as soon as you talk about sharing it with other people, not that that's super vulnerable, or I mean it is, but it's not that vulnerability that's intimidating. It's like that pressure of like, well, now I have to like make sure there's a standard or
Mm.
like a certain message behind it when I might have just been capturing something because like maybe I haven't even had like that introspection about it yet. And maybe that's
Well,
not
and
talked about. Maybe that's common.
but I think that is not talked about for sure. But I think it also depends on where you're at with your um with what you want to do with it, because you can start as an amateur. Obviously you start as an amateur photographer and then you just share whatever you are experiencing and learning. That doesn't mean that you're saying I am this professional photographer and I'm going to sell this to you for I don't know $10,000. And it all depends on what you I think the narrative you have around the work as well, no,
If
something like
I
that.
agree, I think though that if I were to start photography within, I'd be entitled to being on Superware selling 20 ETH photographs, right? Within 2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding.
Amazing. Which are your connections?
No, no. It's just
Circle
really
picture.
cool. I can't wait really to start shooting. I'm definitely gonna start taking the time because I like backpacking. I like
Yeah,
traveling. I like
yeah.
documenting, and I do
Good.
like sharing. So
You
yeah.
should. And one thing that you can think of is like when you go out on those travels, try to like build a little story about your trip. And then you can combine like 10 images or 20 images, like what's called a photo essay about how that trip
Mm.
went. You just need to pick 20 great images to share that
So
story.
what got me was like the other day I posted something on Twitter, and I knew I was like, okay, tell me what's wrong with this photo. And I actually tagged a
Mm,
couple people that I knew would tell me what's wrong with the photo. I took a photo of a gorgeous area in Montana, right? And
yeah,
then and the I had COVID. Like I was able to just like enjoy, just like sit down and rest because I had COVID, couldn't go anywhere. And there's
yeah,
this big lake called Flathead Lake. It's like the biggest natural lake west of the Mississippi. So aside from like in the lower 48 United States, aside from like the Great Lakes, and so it was a pretty picture, and I was like, "What's wrong with it?" And they're like, "Dude, first off, like you always keep your horizon line level." And then just that, I was like, that seems so obvious. But then, so then I took a couple more pictures since then, and I was like, I actually did get one with the horizon line level, and I do agree that that one's better.
mm,
It's almost a little bit subjective in my opinion, but then I also took another picture of like BART, which is like the equivalent to like the subway in New York, right?
Okay.
Or that in DC it starts with an R,
Okay.
like their sister train. And so
Okay.
there's this bathroom, and then I didn't like it had subway tile, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I took like a picture of like it was small enough to where I got the two walls on the sides and the
Yes.
door, and then no matter what I did, like one of the walls lines were crooked, and
Yeah.
so I want to post that one and just say, what's like the proper method here, because
Yeah.
I can get this line straight, or I can get this like complete. I'm sorry, I'm a little off topic, but it's
No,
just
no, no,
difficult.
but that's fine. It's still it's photography, and it's about the process of learning photography. And I'm really good at giving you an answer with that.
Yeah, so I
You
don't know what I'd keep
have two
straight in
options.
that frame.
You have several options, but let me give you two. One would be that you choose what is the most prominent line. Like what is the line, vertical or horizontal, that is going to make you feel that you're falling. Okay?
Mm,
Because there might be one of those two that if you keep it a little bit inclined, you're not gonna feel the sensation that you're falling. Whereas, maybe the other, you see it and and you feel like you're standing and it's fine. So
okay.
maybe the horizontal, it's fine that it's a little bit crooked because the verticals keep you grounded.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the opposite. So that's something that you have to consider. Which of the two is more grounding and doesn't let you feel like you're falling? Because maybe that feeling of falling is what we're referring to when we say keep your horizon line straight. And that doesn't apply to every kind of photograph,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that a tendency when you don't know how to make a photograph is to make the photograph crooked. Like when you don't know how to make it good straight, then you turn.
Because having the device, in my case, a
Yeah,
phone,
yeah,
straight, like if I put a level on it both
yeah,
ways, that's not that's that's how I took the picture. That's what was technically not correct. Like I think I adjusted it and tilted it somehow to
later.
get like the horizon line
Mm,
straight on the
okay.
landscape. Um,
Well, and then you need to know that depends on the lens you're using in the camera, or your perspective, how tall you are, or small, or low, or lower in level, or like how you are in position to those lines is going to shift that perspective too. So what you can do also is afterwards in post production adjust those lines, and
right.
and
Yeah.
that's just a matter of like the lens you use and the camera you use are going to change the perspective. it's
And that's the
it's the
whole
lens.
nother craft. Like photo
Yeah,
editing, so much is demanded of photographers now, actually. Like you have to know, as far as I'm concerned, those are all different skill sets to compile, like to be
mhm.
well rounded. Like a lot of people learn all those things, and they're actually like doing like four different crafts to produce an image. It's really
Yes,
impressive. Really, thanks for humoring me on that.
of course, my
So the
pleasure.
photography will be the segue into beach vendors, and I'm right now I'm viewing. We can go to the website gallery that you have on your link tree, and it's just really fun. Like you have the ocean like moving in the background. I don't know if that's. Then you go to the pictures, and they're all
That's
really
what.
uniform.
You don't know if that's what.
I
You
don't
don't know
know
if
if
it's
that's a video
actually.
that you took or not.
Oh yeah, it is.
In the
Yes,
back.
yeah, that's
Oh,
there.
cool. Yeah.
That's in that place. Yes, yes, yes.
So it's all like very cohesive. I really enjoyed that you did this for your collection. A lot of people would only like OpenSea would be how they feature that collection.
Yeah.
So I really like this because I think it like really adds and like gives justice to the collection. And I see in all of these photographs, your horizon line is perfectly straight.
It should be. Otherwise, I have a ton of friends and teachers that would kill me if it isn't.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like, it's so obvious. Why did I take a crooked picture? And that's why I'm like, it
No,
is intimidating,
you
because there's a
learn,
lot to think about.
no, but you learn. You learn over time. The more you do it, the more you learn. So you're seeing now Beach XYZ, which is the website for my project, and Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you like the idea that this is not only in OpenSea, but it's also here on, in Web2, the traditional format of a website. And that's because I guess this 12 years in New York and then learning photography since 2006 have taught me a lot about how I want to be a professional. What kind of professional do I want to be? And this project in particular, it's my baby project. It's one that I'm really really excited about, because this project has a projection of like a decade. I
Yeah.
don't intend to do this year only. I plan to photograph, interview, and get to know the stories of beach vendors around the world. And, go to 20 beaches, more or less, around the world and photograph around 500 beach vendors. And then add to this a whole research about the informal economy, about
Hmm.
how they make a living, about how they choose this profession over others. I
You
think
know
it's very,
what's interesting, since you
yeah,
brought up this informal economy, and we're also like tied into like these are NFTs for listeners. Maybe some people won't be familiar with that, but it has to do with some cryptocurrency, um, and ordeal and Web3 technologies such as like now we have non-custodial wallets. I want to like move past all that, but you brought up the informal economy, and I wonder, like, you know, one day paper money may not exist, and so with this informal economy, like these beach vendors, will they also cryptocurrency because of its nature of like being a ledger? It's I just wonder if they're going to use cryptocurrency in this case or like bartering, and I'm sure it'll be both. You know, I'm sure it'll be both.
well, look, the situation with the beach vendors is very different in different countries. Okay, so just to give a little bit of a context, in 2015, I traveled to a beach in Argentina called Pinamar. I was traveling with my family in Argentina, and we decided to go to this beach. Argentina is not known for its beaches because it's not like the Caribbean, so the water is super cold and the sand is a little bit dark. So it's not like the beautiful place to go. Talking from a Venezuelan that lived in the Caribbean, and you have like clear water and white beach sands, and it's just paradise in comparison, right? Not to diminish any kind of
California's
beach.
beaches, I think, are similar, and I think they're
Which one?
gorgeous. Like a lot of rock
Yeah,
formations, dark water. It's cold. Um, it's definitely no Caribbean, right? Like,
exactly.
but it's still
Exactly.
beautiful in its own way.
It's still beautiful. Yes, exactly. But then it was interesting because what I experienced back then, this is 2015, was that I went to the beach with my family and I saw all of these big cards. And if you enter the website, you're going to be able to see them, that all these beach vendors had, like these big cards where they would have their the different like things that they would sell, and that was not something I had seen in Venezuela ever. And they were selling all kinds of different things, which were also different than from Venezuela. This was back in 2015. We're seeing now the images from this year, from 2022, and
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, but these are it is the same place because what happened is that I started that project only making photographs of the beach vendors,
I also
and
loves
then
the environment. I've
yeah,
seen beach vendors in Mexico, and
mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it. Sorry, I just wanted to let you know,
No,
like
no,
I do
yeah.
have some familiarity. Like it's a little bit more exhilarating. You've got the wind, salt in the air. You're already happy, and then people are selling, oftentimes like these home crafted like goods that are just like fun, and then they know they understand the assignment. Like they're having a good time, I think too, and they're willing to talk and sometimes they're really busy, sometimes they're relaxed. It's pretty cool. But go on. I just wanted to let you know, like I do have some context as well.
Nice. No, I like that. I like that because I think one of the things that is important with this project is that it can bring some memories to people. If you grew up in the beach culture, then you're going to definitely connect. And if you didn't, but like you have been to the beach and have experienced this relationship to the vendors there, then you may have like another connection. Then if you don't, then maybe it's just interesting to you that that's a profession, like that's what some people do to make a living, right? And what's interesting in this beach in Argentina is that this is only done for 3 months in the year, because
Mm.
in Argentina we have seasons, and so it's only from like December until end of February. So it's like 3 months of like December, January, February,
And that's the warm weather months?
and that's the warm weather months. Exactly.
Interesting.
So it's very different the way they sell there. It's very different the way they behave there, because they're not. That's not their the way they make a living for the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other places like Cartagena, which is a beach I'm going next, and I also went back in 2015. It's very different. They are selling there every single day, so it's a different dynamic. So when I saw this back in 2015, I thought it was really interesting, and I photographed them, but I didn't have that extra layer that I have today, which was the research layer. Like I was photographing, I was asking their name, but I didn't wrote down their names. Then in the next beach I went, which was in Cartagena, Colombia, I started to ask more questions, but I didn't have a specific questionnaire. So it was all over the place. It was like my mind going all over the place, asking 1,000 questions, getting to realize that there's so many interesting and amazing stories, and that was that. And then I went to Venezuela, where I come from, and I also photographed there. Same thing, right? Until I realized I need to do something else, because this is not it. I cannot. This project is not only this. There has to be more, and that's when I decided to study something else,
Was it
which I
originally going to be a book? So it sounds like this project's not only was it inspired in 2015, but in between 2015 and 2022, you were visiting different beaches and kind of figuring out an approach. And it sounds like are your thoughts that it become a book? It sounds like you've had an agenda for about 7 years already, figuring out like what to do with this, and it's very unique. I haven't seen another project like it in Twitter or on Twitter, or let alone Web3. But like, what was stemming, like, it sounds like even back then you were kind of calling it a project, and that's before OpenSea, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Because we look, as photographers, we learn photography from books. Like
Mm-hmm.
before social media, we learned photography from books. I have a ton of books right behind me. They're all like almost all of them are photography, right? And you learn about projects, photography projects, because of those books. And I mean, obviously, you have prints that photographers sell as well, but the way before to put a story together was to build a book. So I have a lot of references from since I started studying photography. There's a very important photographer called Rineke Dijkstra, who has a series called Beach Portraits, not beach vendors, but beach portraits of teenagers at the beach. And that was definitely a reference for me. Like she has a book, obviously, about it, and many other photographers that are out there that decide, what, I like this story, I like this narrative, or I like this topic, I'm going to photograph this, and I'm going to maybe research about this and add more to the imagery. So it was in my mind, but I actually hadn't practiced it the way I thought I should. I didn't have the practice of doing it. I had done projects before, but different kinds of projects. And this time I knew I was lacking the tools to know how to research, how to actually get in depth into a topic. And there's people that are autodidactical, like they teach,
Didax.
that they teach themselves, self-taught.
Right.
So some people are self-taught and they're really good at doing that. I love academia. I love studying. I love studying among people. Like I love the fact that I get to know people because I study with them. And that's actually, I think it's a hack of life. Every time you study, you get to know people, and then they if you do an international program, which I've done too so far, you get to have friends all over the world. So right now, I know I can go to Mozambique, and a friend from a program will wait for me so that I can photograph people in Mozambique. And I have someone else in, different parts of the world, right? In Greece, for example, I have a friend who received me, and I was able to like visit. And, you know,
Mm.
I think that's a hack in life. But in general, I think that I thought, I need more. And that's when I went into studying visual anthropology. I did a master's degree in visual anthropology because I found that that was the perfect combination of researching to give depth to this project, and don't forget about the visual part, because anthropology in itself is very, very theory based. But then adding the visual was also like, okay, but then I can do something with my profession, either with photography or with documentary and film, etc.
Well, and you can write all you want, but a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So it's essential. It is essential, I think, for the project. Like
Yeah,
that, it's a
yeah.
part of that documentation, part of that research. I was thinking too, when you brought up somebody, I already forgot their name, but with the beach portraits,
Mm-hmm.
right? That looks
Green
different.
Extra. I want to give you the name so that you can
Yeah.
search for her, and maybe here. Uh, Let me write this to you.
Do you know how recent that project was?
Oh no, it's an old project. It has
Dijkstra.
probably 15 years, or yeah, no, it's been a while since she did that project.
I'm just writing down now that I want to put that in links.
Yes, for
Her
sure. I can
project
give you.
in links for people later too.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me just document that. And then, so Reniki Dijkstra, right?
Yeah, I'm really not sure how her name is pronounced
Okay.
very well. So,
Rineke. And then,
mhm,
so beach portraits. And
yeah.
somebody else can do that project today, probably even in the same location that she had done it, completely inspired. I was kind of thinking, like, I wonder if somebody would call that a copycat, but at the same time, it's carrying the legacy of that project, because today it would probably look a lot different than when she had done it originally. So, and
Well,
then
I
as long
mean,
as you're like
yeah,
paying
she used
tribute,
film.
yeah, okay, it's a film project. So like imagine like just it I was thinking, with paralleling that project and that idea to yours, like in 50 years, maybe you do this project again in the same locations and kind of document the differences, or somebody else, a student that you've inspired, maybe somebody from within the Twitter community that you've inspired, or
Yeah,
just down the road that like finds a book or sees your photographs on blockchain, whatever. It's just interesting that like that's going to be a part of the same project, like that's like a part two, and I think it's really important. I think that would still be considered really important work, as long as it's like saying, this is inspired by Romina Hendlin's beach vendors, and I wanted to like document the changes since then, and by asking people questions, how have their perceptions or thoughts changed, as well as the imagery. What are people wearing? What are people selling? What are their vendor cards? So
absolutely. In fact, and I just sent you a tweet with this comparison, because I did this master's. This master allowed me to like take the project back into my hands and like restart it in a way. But I had all the images from the start, which was 2015, and I met in Pinamar this year Ariel, which you're gonna see if you're looking at the
he is
YouTube.
in the project too. Yeah. Oh, so you saw him in 2015 as
Yes.
well.
Exactly. So I
Wow.
had the same person, Ariel, who posed for me in 2015 when I was just starting this project, and I met him again in 2022. So, this happened already, what we are discussing right now, and it was wild. It was amazing, and it was incredible to meet him again. I had the image with me because
You did.
yeah, because I print the images and show them around, you need, the process of asking this for beach vendors, it's not that easy. I have to go around, and in my Twitter I have made different, like, Twitter threads with each beach vendor and showing a little bit of the process, because I'm
Do
very
any of them
didactic.
have Twitter? Have you asked?
They don't have Twitter, actually, or they didn't share with me any Twitter. They did share with me their phones and their accounts. I saw some have Instagram, so I have seen some of them in Instagram. um, but it's fascinating because you get to see how they have evolved. Ariel shared with me, like, he was like, oh my god, look at that card, of course that's the first card I started with. He also was like, oh my god, I was so young and thin at that time,
Yeah.
and that was funny also. And he also changed some of the things that he you know
It's
that he's
selling.
selling. I mean, obviously, he's selling, like, masks as well, which in Spanish are called barbijos. And so that tells you a signs of the time, like he's selling masks,
Yeah.
barbijos. That's like, that means COVID.
Hmm.
So, like, you have no COVID in 2015, and then 2022, that's also something that you're selling there. So there is a potential with this project to see a lot of changes throughout the years. I mean, the initially, like I said, I want to travel to 20 beaches around the world, and I started with this one, Pinamar, with all this methodology, which I would love to share with you what it has, because
Hmm.
it's I think the NFT space gave me this, like, push to invent whatever I wanted. So, like, in 2015, I didn't see potential because I didn't know what to do with it besides a book. And I thought, how am I going to even sell a book? I could do a Kickstarter or something like that. But there weren't, like, all the layers, that came after. And with NFT and with the possibility of, like, connecting with so many different people around the world, like, look, we had known not we didn't know each other. We had no way of, like, connecting, and now I'm here in a podcast with you beside it. So it's, like, fascinating, right? So what I decided to do was, you know what? I'm going to take a different stance here. I'm going to make a portrait, but I'm going to make an interview of 10, 15 minutes and gather a little bit of their life story. I'm going to buy from them two products, one for me for exhibitions in person, and one for the collector of the NFT.
You're kidding. I
I'm
had
not.
no idea.
Okay, then that's great, because now you are going to know that if you buy an NFT of one of the beach vendors, that the product is, you know, being able to be in transport, so, like, not food, but, like, anything else that is not food, then you receive the product in your in with like, in your home, if you give me the address, or in your work office or whatever. I decided also that I wanted to print the photograph. So I decided to work with local places. And in Buenos Aires, I printed the 20 NFTs. So I have the prints of all of them. And the idea is that because I make them, I made them sign a model release to each one of the vendors, explaining that I would sell photographs. They also read in the contract that they get a 10% of the first sale of that photograph. So that means that by acquiring an NFT, you're getting the printed photograph, you're
Hmm.
getting the product. If the product is something that it was food, I have a video eating that, and so you receive that video. So at least you receive something in relation to the product, or
Right.
you receive a photograph of the product. It depends on the circumstance at that moment. Then you receive the research. Once I have the research, ready, I did a lot of behind the scenes, so I have unlockable content to share with the collector. And this is, because I just wanted to explore all the possible creative things I could do with it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Like there's a lot of different interactions now with the technology, right?
exactly.
And a lot of this stuff seems like it was possible in Web3, but now it's like I don't know. It seems more achievable. And some of it is exclusive to Web3. But I
It
sorry, I
is.
meant some of it. Some of it was possible. Technically, somebody can buy the image, the JPEG off of you, and then the first person to buy it, you can like also send the video or the merchandise as well.
Mhm.
But now I think it's still more important because like it's on the blockchain, right? It's pointing to that file, and like you're able to now it actually becomes a part of the project's story. It's like beach vendors will be recorded through time and like all the different transactions, and you'll be able to see maybe not everyone that's viewed the project and has had exposure, but all the hands that it's like changed like through the years or months, decades. And I think that kind of adds another like realm to the project, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like
interesting.
I'm not verbalizing totally, but that's like a part of the story of beach vendors now. Like every transaction that takes place, transfer of
Hmm.
ownership,
Yeah.
is like every person that's buying this story, right? So he studied to be a lifeguard, and now he works at the beach selling merchandise, wristbands, and anklets in Pinamar. Is it Pinamar?
Pinamar. Yeah.
And his name is Lucas.
Yeah.
And he's got like a really cool looking cart. I can't tell like what all the merchandise is without zooming in, but it's really sunny out. It's although it's not the Caribbean, um, I think it's a pretty beach and it's a
Yeah.
pretty
It is.
photograph.
It is.
and and um and now like Lucas, like this description is going to travel with the photograph. And if you do make a book, like he will be in the book, but now like his cart is also on blockchain. It's all very relevant. It all ties together really well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As I appreciate that you say that. And there's another thing that is very interesting. If you go down and look at the metadata of the photograph, I'm also playing around with it. As a photographer, the metadata is crucial. Usually, the metadata is hidden, you don't see it, but it's all these keywords that we add to the photographs for us to find it, for SEO to find it. In this case, what I find very interesting is that, the moment that I have the 20 beaches, and let's not go that far because that's, I say
Is
within
the
a
meta
decade.
chain the metadata will continue to evolve since you're maintaining the
Exactly.
collection. And a
First,
lot
look,
of
my
people would
camera.
like do
Yeah,
different collections for this. I think it's really cool you're going to continue to add to the collection so that the
exactly.
metadata will adjust. So like
Exactly. Like, look here, for example, it says camera Nikon D50, D750. I'm going to evolve that camera at some point. I'm going to buy a new one. So you're going to see all the images taken with this camera. Then at some point, there's going to be another one. Then you are going to see through continents. So you're going to be able to sort out through which continents I went. And then you're going to be able to see, for example, one that I really like is like the special treat. So for each photograph, I find like this special treat that each one had. And that is going to be a rare thing for each one of them. Like some of
mhm.
them, they have a special treat that is more interesting than others, as well as like the product. I think that it's very interesting because you're going to get to see the beach vendors that sell wristbands and necklaces and rings and all of that in all the beaches around the world that I go that they do that. But then maybe what they sell is very different, or in some places there's also some kind of like similarity. So I believe that the metadata could be like a very fun thing to do, to play with at some point. And yeah, I'm excited about that one
No,
too,
I
as I said.
think that that's something I haven't heard before in regards to photography projects. One, like a lot of people have collections that'll continue to grow, but like the metadata, which means so sorry, just back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Metadata is usually like traits attributed to whatever the NFT is pointing towards or the smart contract is pointing towards, which is the NFT. In this case, it's a photograph. And so the metadata has traits such as artist. All of the I'd imagine this doesn't change. Romina Hendlin 100% have this trait. Then like some of these things it kind of adds to like the what addition do you have? What traits do you have in your collection? Me as a collector, because like so infrastructure, 40% of them are carts. maybe there's some that are baskets, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the other traits you have for infrastructure? And this is
We
saying
have,
that this is what the vendor's using.
yeah, so here in Argentina there's a lot of carts, but then there's also a lot of baskets. There's also like ice boxes,
Right.
because
I
some of
saw,
them,
yeah, I did see that.
mhm,
So,
some of
like,
them have bags and they don't have any, like big infrastructure, but the infrastructure is just like a bag where they're carrying all of the merchandise. Like for example, Guillermo, who does the tattoos, he doesn't have a cart or a basket. He's a very interesting one right there.
this, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so in the case of Guillermo,
Is he doing permanent tattoos on the beach?
no, no, they're not permanent.
Oh, okay.
They're not permanent. Yeah. But he just had a bag, and like in that bag, he has everything he needs.
That's
Uh,
really fun. He probably has a lot of fun doing that.
yes, he does. He loves doing that. He was really, that was a really nice encounter. And one of the things that I love about this project is that it really allows me to like continue to be creative. And what I did for some of the products is that I actually did like a workshop in wood frame, like framing. And so I created several frames to put inside the products that the collector is receiving. So in the case of Guillermo, for example, you are receiving a framed tattoo that was
Oh,
made
very cool.
on a leaf. We
Yeah.
found the leaf,
Wow.
like in the beach, and he did the tattoo,
Some of
on top
these
of.
interactions are really taking a lot of time. Like, you're going to need to
Yeah,
travel a lot to do this. If you're going to do 20 images from like each country, for instance,
yeah.
or maybe it's speech specific, I'm not sure the approach you'll take. Either way, I think it's really cool, but
Mhm.
like, I'd imagine that takes you longer than a day or two. Like,
It's a well, no, of course. This was a 5-day shoot,
mhm.
and the
So that's like
idea,
averaging like 4 vendors per day because you're
yes,
spending a lot of time like talking to them, looking through their merchandise, and then like in Guillermo's case, finding a leaf, having him put a tattoo on it, making sure that you go back to where you're staying and like and save that appropriately so that you can transport it. It's all very very cool, and Twitter Spaces are a really good place to share this stuff. And I'm sorry if the listeners feel like we're selling anything. It's certainly not that. I just want to like admire the project. I haven't bought one of your NFTs. I think that like I will. I think like if I can I will, because it's like definitely like evolved like the more I've learned about it. And I really like that the metadata, in reality, most of your buyers might buy based on the image or based on the description or based on you and your personality and your story and what you're doing. There's so many different reasons to buy. What I do really like is you're really taking advantage of some of the technology here to put traits in, because like maybe if I buy like somebody that's selling wristbands in Argentina in Pinamar, then
yeah.
I would want to like find somebody doing that in Greece if you're going to go to Greece and do it. But I
Well,
know you're going to go to
that's so funny.
Venezuela, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
it's funny you said Greece, because last year I went to Greece. I didn't have this project in, like put together the way it is now, but I did photograph two beach vendors because I cannot, stop myself from doing that. And so I continue it, but I didn't do the whole methodology yet because this year is where I actually built it. And one of them was one had wristbands, actually. So like it's
Oh
funny.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So one I bought a painting and the other one I bought wristbands. But he didn't have a card. He was taking everything in his hand. He had all of them in his hand. So, and he was from I think he was from Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. I have it written down.
Oh
And
wow, yeah.
yeah, because there's a lot of African migration to Greece. And so, very different demographic, very interesting interaction. Again, like I'm sharing the project. I'm not telling people to go buy the
Yeah,
project. I
and
don't like,
to be
I don't like
frank,
doing that. For
I
me, it's
think
like I share it because I love this project, and this is something
Yeah,
important.
it's
Like, I
just
continue to
fun.
tell
Like,
people,
I'm
I'm
really
gonna do
glad we're
this
talking
project,
about it.
whereas I sell it in NFTs or not, I'm gonna continue to do this project because I love this project. It's like a dream of connecting portraiture, which I love doing, documentary work, which is like an anthropology, getting to know people and their stories, and then building, a document of a niche, which is beach vendors, which it's going to evolve over time, and I feel like that's part of history, and like I'm putting like a little bit of my energy and my vision and a little bit of my sensitivity into bringing the world something that they could learn from, because then you listen to these stories and you're like, wow, I mean, I realize that beach vendors and I have the similar personality. We don't want to have a boss that tells us every day like what we have to do, or give us a top of how much we are going to earn. They are like free souls, and they like to like go around and like meet people. They love getting to know the customers. Every one of them was like, it's so nice, we're here at the beach. Of course it's hard, but like we get to know people, we get to meet people and talk to them and learn from them. So like, in a way, what they're doing is similar to what I'm doing. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't know, it's a passion project for sure. Of course I wanted to be successful, of course I wanted to sold out, because I mean, why not, I need to go to the next beach. But it's gonna happen either way, is what I mean.
You're right, right, exactly. And I think it's important to talk about. Obviously, a lot of people will be interested in NFTs. It's travel focused. I'm super excited that we talked. I wanted to point out that I think this project is actually like your professionalism's like really exuded in your organization, intentionality with it, the theme. It's very cohesive. How you're producing it, how you're giving like additional utility attached to it, because a lot of people think that attaching utility to an image like detracts, like you're devaluing the image. But I think it's really cool that you're just trying to enhance, like, it's not just like this project isn't just the image, it's the entire story. And you're really just like making sure to like allow people to share in that experience in a really unique way. Like you're getting samples from the beach vendor cards, something I totally didn't realize. So like, again, like not paid promotion, is this is just an enthusiasm. And I wanted to point out Alejandro Blanco, right, selling
Yeah.
the dulce de leche. What is it?
Yes.
It looked like
Yes.
churros,
Juanitos.
cubanitos.
Yes.
So it's not, yeah, definitely not churros. This one's kind of gold for people because it's the only one that's not taken in broad daylight. This looks to be like towards dusk, and I find it really appropriate because is this a warm food as well?
No, it's not warm. I mean, like it's like a waffle type of dough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it in like a circular or cylindrical way, like a churro, and then inside he puts in the dulce de leche.
Oh my
So
gosh, that'll be
I
so good.
encourage you to, I mean, the audience, to look at some of the threads that I have done. I'm going to make it available in an easier way for people to see, because I have that video of the dulce de leche coming inside of the cubanito, which is crazy because it's like so delicious. And dulce de leche is one of my passions too. So if you see my Twitter biography, it says dulce de leche there. It's more important than my last name sometimes.
The I like dulce de leche too. I think like anything flavored that way, but like my favorite
Mhm.
cake is like tres leches. But
Oh yeah, that's the
the
second one. Yeah,
definitely my favorite cake. And then
yeah.
the I just wanted to go over a couple things, and
Mhm.
we're definitely like we went longer than I told you we would because I've been having such a good time and you've been so like fun and cool to talk to. But I wanted to ask
Thank you, Kaya.
one more question and then
Mhm.
just give like closing thoughts.
Yes.
Um, and I'll frame that. I have a question for that too. But
Perfect.
you bring up that 10% of that first sale, the primary
Mhm.
sale of the NFT will go back to the beach vendor. And I was wondering about the logistics with that. How did you figure out like how to execute on that?
Okay, so what I did was I asked each beach vendor to sign a model release. And in that model release, I said, I am going to give you 10% of the first sale of the photograph if you give me your details. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so each one of them wrote down their name, their phone number. In some cases, they don't have an email. In some cases, they have a phone. And most of them work with what's called Mercado Pago back in Argentina. There's that's it's like a sale here, more or less, like a way to get direct payment from customers. So people have it's like it can also be like Amazon. Not sure. Do you pay
Hmm.
through Amazon? Like how would you Apple Pay? Like
Oh
a sort of
yeah,
Apple
if they
Pay.
have, right? So you just well, so who have you been able to pay so far, and like, did you end up talking with them?
Yeah. So first thing that I did was to all of them. Once I had all the images edited, I sent them an image. So I took of all of them and one or two images that they were like not specifically like this one, but like smiling, for example. And I said
Mm-hmm.
like this, I'm gonna send to you. So I contacted every one of them through phone or through email, sending them the photograph. And that was a way for me to prove, obviously, if they gave me the information correctly. Okay. So I think it's a 90% response. There were like one or two people that didn't respond to that message. And, that's just a fact of the project that sometimes they're going to give you a detail and it might have an error. And so that's a learning for me for sure that, like, in one or two cases, I need to find someone that knows them and tell them, like, look, your body, da da da, I need you to help me
Wow.
contact them. That might be the case for like one or two people, but in all of the other cases, I'm in contact with them, many of them through WhatsApp, others through email. And I have sold 4 of the 20 NFTs. And my goal initially was like to reach at least 10 NFTs sold to start giving back. Why is this? Because the model that I chose to like price this was like I did a 4-week release, and so each week I would drop 5 NFTs, and each week the price was increasing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
until I minted the 20 NFTs. So there's from like 1 to 20, the price starts to go up. Um, and so I don't think it's fair that I would give back to just those four the 10% of those sales when
Because
there
then
might
they
be.
can kind of talk to each other a little bit too, right? And
I don't think, not
you don't think
necessarily.
so?
Depends. Some of them might be like more bodies than others because, like I said, they're not there all year. They're only there
Mm-hmm.
for a season. So people come back to maybe to other cities. Maybe they continue to be in that same city, but the majority leaves to another job. So they might not see each other. Besides the ones that do wristbands and necklaces, mostly all of them work together, but not everyone. So I don't think it's fair that some of them will receive more than others. But I do realize that, and I decided to have a deadline, like whatever I sell before I go to the next beach, that I'm going to give return. So, like, if, I have right now 4 beach vendors, let's say I get to sell the 10 I wanted until the next beach, which is actually in like 3 weeks. So I have 3 weeks to keep pushing this. Then I'm gonna make that first give back. What was really fun was like to have that back and forth with them. Initially, like when I send them the picture, I was like, oh yes, I do have the contact. Like what I set out to do is real. They're here, they replied, this is gonna happen. And by having their number, I can do the transfer through Mercado Pago, as I mentioned. I have obviously my people in Argentina, not only my parents, but I have friends. And so the plan is to like get the funds, transfer the funds, and that I can transfer to each of the people. It's not the most easygoing thing to do. And I
No.
think that in each beach, I'm going to face the challenges that presents. But it's a great challenge because it will allow me to grow in that sense. I've always wanted to give back since that story at the beginning in that town, Santa
Right. Wow.
Suela.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do something, like I didn't think that
Well,
only
so now
photograph.
you were able to take the picture. Sorry to interrupt, but like you
Yeah,
just
yeah,
tied that together so well that like
yeah.
before, why would I take this picture? I can't do anything to help. Versus now, you were able to pick up the camera, bam, bam, bam. Plus, it's not as desolate of a situation, but like that's so interesting. I can't believe I didn't like tie that together. You're
No, it's
astonishing.
okay. I mean, it's my life story. That's how I am able to tie it together. Of course, I think I've come a long way to like find how. And again, like I think I'm gonna keep growing. Maybe this will become something bigger. This is just the first year. It's like I've been like here since doing this since 2015. And as I mentioned before, like even before I had thought about beach vendors and did one or two pictures, but this project will evolve in a decade. The technology will evolve. I will evolve as an entrepreneur and also as a businesswoman, hopefully, and just like try to bring some more smoothness to that process, of like giving back. Also, I obviously dream of like making a book and having everyone have a book, like that ultimate dream. Every beach vendor has a book in their hands. So that's going to require a whole logistics. But that's dreaming and then putting some like logistics and trying to figure out financing store that. I do hope that this project becomes bigger as people see my commitment to it, because I understand people don't know me and they don't understand how real I am or not. I'm super real. I'm here. I'm in flesh. But I care so much about this that I know that over time people will see it, and hopefully, like, as I think, like, whoever starts to get to understand this in the beginning will see it much more as it continues. Like when 3 5 years have happened and I've gone to I don't know how many beaches. I really need to see how life allows me to do that. Maybe 5 10 beaches. Then there's going to be something really impressive happening there. I just need to, like I say sometimes, I just need to
It's
wait
gonna
until time
speak
passes.
bounds too. You're going in 3 weeks. It doesn't matter if you sell some NFTs, right? And that was like that's like, and you've been doing it for you've been traveling for much longer, but you've been doing beach vendor portrait photography and some
Yeah,
research for at least 7 years, and
yeah.
like your your collection will grow, and a lot of people would be really discouraged by that. I hope that you don't see that as a bad thing. That like there's some work listed, and some people are burning their work right away. I think like your project is just different, and so it can be
Mm,
treated differently. I hope that like you remain like confident in that. I think I've learned a lot from like I hope photographers listen,
mm,
because like you're not that all um, art needs to be like so structured or anything, but a lot of people are looking for ways to kind of like really organize their thoughts and convey, and you're using so many different like tools to execute this like really enormous project that I don't think anyone could get the grasp of unless they really like talk to you and hear from you. So I hope
that's a
that like,
challenge.
yeah, I'll definitely like do my best to make sure like other people are impacted, as photographers too, because you have like a lot of alpha. We'll put it that way. You have a lot of alpha
Thank
for
you.
people.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Thank you
course.
for seeing that. Thank you for seeing that. And I encourage everyone that listens to this podcast to reach out to me because I'm approachable and I'm not gonna sell you anything. Like I can definitely have a talk with you and guide you through, whatever your process is. I definitely believe that that my journey has taught me to like understand that things take time and that there is a process to everything, and like the more you obviously get in contact with other people that have done it, the more you're going to learn the different options you have, and that's has been like a thing for me too. Like I've learned from so many other photographers. So if this is helpful for anyone, like, you know I'm
I
happy,
think it will be, yeah. And I'm sure some people will reach out because I do know some people that will listen, and I know a lot of people out of those people are going to like what they heard, and they're also very sociable. But for anybody, I'll have Romina's Twitter
Yes.
handle on the page as well as her website. With that, I wanted to do like a closing thought. I think something I'll try to pattern as the podcast finds its identity is to just ask everyone, like given the context of token travelers and stuff, you know, what forgive me for being cheesy, but what's your favorite part about traveling, or why do you find it important?
I think that the moment you move your body geographically, the energy changes, the perspective changes, the your experience in the world changes. And I think that it's so important to move out of, again, cheesy comfort zones of like being in the same place and feeling comfortable there and not risking. And like, I think that when you travel, you risk and taking some risks and trying new things that only traveling many times provide is one of the most interesting things about traveling.
You
So
talked about that feeling like moving your body geographically, and it kind of like in hindsight I really identify with that because like I thrive in like changing environments, um and so like dynamic environments, right? And so even though often situations are the same, I'm sitting at a restaurant or I'm driving a rental car, right? But like I'm in a new location and automatically I think that like engages, like you said, it changes the energy. It like engages me to like start to observe everything. So even though like, oh, I have these trees at home, or like, yeah, that's a street, like somehow I'm like able to be hyper aware and like really focused on my surroundings and like suck that in. And I think that's been like, you know, I've noticed that that's like really good for my soul, my psyche, like just having that feeling that things are new, you know, and it kind of
yeah,
gives me that motivation. And so I think you nailed it perfectly, and you really made me think about that.
nice. That's interesting.
Okay,
I like to know your take on it. So it was nice to listen to that.
thanks.
Yeah.
You inspired it, and that's what I love about conversation too. With that, I'm gonna end the podcast, and you and I can just talk for a little bit. But I know you got a space to get to, so
Yes. So thank you so much. I want to thank you for this interview, for this conversation, for this exchange of life experiences. I still have to get to know you a lot more. So
yeah.
you'll come to my podcast when I continue to do it. But yeah, no, thank you so much for your interest. I really enjoyed being here and talking with you. And you made me also like these conversations also, make you question things in different ways. It's not always like the same thing. So I like the things that were that came up in this conversation. So thank you, Saya. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for the opportunity to talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you.